our organization was founded by President Kennedy in 1963, just months before he was assassinated, around the time that Medgar Evers was assassinated in the summer of 1963, by bringing together some of the nation's top lawyers, including at the time, which was notable, 50 Black lawyers to the White House for a meeting about how members of the private bar can be more than just servants, can be more than just those who provide service ad hoc here and there, but how you could actually come together to do things that complement what government at the time was, at least in fits and starts, trying to do, which was to advance civil rights and ultimately racial justice and equity. Now, I believe that the work of being a lawyer is an inherently political project. It's not just about an individual case, not just about an individual matter, but it's really about how we can bring our full selves to the party, so to speak, to leverage the tools of the rule of law, to marry it with other strategies to try to promote those ends of racial justice and racial equity. At the Lawyers Committee today, we boast a staff of about close to 80 people right now, but relationships with over 200 law firms throughout the country. And right now, getting close to about 20,000 lawyers who have volunteered time and energy as part of our nationwide election protection effort, a coalition that we convene that involves hundreds of organizations around the country in this very critical moment in that history. The idea being that whether you're a lawyer or a layperson, there's a role for all of us to play in service of strengthening democracy, and democracy cannot be strengthened unless those voices that are at the margins get the attention, support, and justice that they so richly deserve.
Right. Thank you all so much for your introduction. So we're going to go ahead and hop onto it. And Dr. Segas, we can come on out of shared screen. Awesome. So the first question is, from your respective vantage points, where are athletes' voices, platforms most needed in this moment?
Well, I mean, I'll jump in. I'm going to say I have been on this, feels like a whirlwind of Zoom calls and virtual conferences. And I think that we are at a critical time where we need athletes' voices to help frame issues and educate on the issues. We don't necessarily always see athletes in that. I think the public doesn't always see athletes in that role, but for RISE, again, we're seeking to educate and empower that community so that they can be leaders in this racial equity space. And so I do think that they have the privilege to some degree of having the platform that many will hear. And so I think a role for them is to educate, really to frame issues and to educate folks on issues, not necessarily to tell the public where they need to land on the issue. To give a concrete example, for instance, the Players Coalition, I think, of coming out of the NFL, did a really good job of framing some of the issues around criminal justice reform, right? They educated folks that here's an issue. We had already had great pieces of academic literature, like the new Jim Crow. We'd already had different documentaries, but in this instance, we had athletes saying, okay, here's the issue. Here's a disparity in incarceration based on race. Here are some of the policies that I love that you guys have already mentioned, the importance of policies. Here are some of the policies that are exacerbating, creating that issue, and here's what we can do about those. And so I don't think it was telling Americans where they needed to fall on that issue, but rather saying, this is an issue. Let us help educate you on this issue, and let us help educate you on how we can address this issue.
Michelle, if I could follow up on Diane, I totally agree. I'm so impressed with the work of the Players Coalition. When I see players, just to shout out a few, when he was with my home team, the New Orleans Saints, Benjamin Watson and Demario Davis, when they spoke out in favor of a constitutional amendment in that state to change a requirement under state law or lack of a requirement that there be a unanimous jury verdict in certain felonies. You could be convicted in Louisiana of certain felonies without a unanimous jury, which is only one of 2 states in the country where that was true. And so what that told me, that and so many other issues, policing, what have you, we need our athletes, especially those with significant platforms, on the hard issues, right? The issues that are already within reach, that's good, but we really need them on the hard issues to do, as Diane said, to help frame the context, to help shift narratives and to open doors of thinking and opportunity, to help to mainstream the notion that justice isn't a narrow box. We should have a wider aperture, so to speak, on what justice means. And I think it's hardest to do that on racial justice. And that's where we need the athletes the most. That's where we have our, people who identify and have an appreciation for someone across racial lines. Sports is one of those venues, right? Athletics. And so we need to leverage that to help to socialize and popularize and mainstream some of the harder issues.
Great. T. Marie, any particular reaction?
I would say it's needed everywhere. I think from their own personal communities that they may be from. A lot of times some of these athletes are seen as hometown heroes. So what is it to go back to your hometown and say, this is something you should be concerned about, and this is how it's going to impact us as a community, you here specifically. They need to talk to the communities that they're representing, the teams they're playing on. They're now heroes to that community. So that's now an addition of their network. So they need to be talking to these folks. And then also nationally, whether it's, utilizing your Twitter account, whether it's utilizing, creating your own show, your own podcast, or just saying, hey, you know what, this has become news to me and I don't like how it's making me feel and how it's, treating people that look like me. So I think this is something you all need to be informed about, and this is how you can get more information. So I think, everywhere. I'll share a quick story. When I first moved back to Birmingham, I was managing a movie theater. And it was around the time the movie The Blind Side came out. And I'll leave my feelings about the film to myself, Michelle. But this was right when Nick Saban had just signed on to be Alabama's coach. And I have never seen people show up 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 times to watch a movie over and over again just to see this one man. And I mean, literally months of sold out performances just because they wanted to cheer when they saw Nick Saban, who was actually not representing Alabama in the film, but they knew he's ours now. This means something. This is big. So these athletes, our leadership in sports arena, have the opportunity to really be a huge vocal, a huge bullhorn for issues that we're experiencing, not only in our communities, but also nationally.
Thank you. So Diane, I want to drill down on something you mentioned at the beginning of your comments around the importance of athletes being the framers and the educators around these issues, and less advocating a particular landing, but framing and educating. How much work do athletes need to do to get a sufficient immersion or education themselves to be equipped to become the framers and educators for others? How much of that are you all seeing in your work? Is that a part of what you do? Mm-hmm. You speak to that some?
So absolutely. So for RISE, it is a part of what we do, and I'm excited. We do quite a bit with Damon. I'm going to say we have hijacked Damon and a number of other people on his team, since one of the areas of social justice that athletes have really decided to focus on has been civic engagement and voting. The Lawyers Committee has just been invaluable partners to us in this, because our goal, right, again, is to educate and empower. It doesn't mean that we think we're holding all the expertise. In fact, we know we're not, and we often partner with organizations that really do have their deep expertise in certain areas. But in answer to your question, I think one of the reasons why I took this position is because I do believe in the power of sport, and I do believe in the mindset of many athletes. And so I think it takes quite a lot of preparation to fill this role effectively, right? But like, for instance, Damon referenced Ben Watson. Ben prepped quite a bit. You could have a conversation with him and he really is knowledgeable on on these issues. Now, he may be knowledgeable on others, I don't know, but I'm just saying I've listened to him on these issues. So to your point, I do think it takes a good bit of preparation, but I actually also think athletes are a population that understands the value of preparation, right? This is generally, in our experience, once I've engaged with athletes, coaches, even executives in the space that decide this is important, this is a group that's like, okay, so it's important, it's a priority. How do I prepare? There's no question about the necessity of preparation in this space. So I do think it takes a lot of preparation, but I feel like this population is predisposed to understand that. The other thing I will say that we push, and I push for everyone, I'm not saying that athletes shouldn't advocate a particular point. I think they're like people like anybody else. You should say whatever you want to say. But I think I think advocacy is something that we push a lot. If you're going to step into the role of advocate of a particular end, I think that's another level of preparation, right? So I can tell you, I think this is an important issue. We need to look at it. We need to get in it. We need to figure out things to read and learn in a particular issue. And that's very different than saying, and now I've done all that, and here's what I think we should do. So I think it's good to make those distinctions because, it goes right to your question. One requires way more preparation and way more understanding of all the issues before you take that advocacy stance.
Great, thank you. T. Marie or Damon, any particular reaction to that?
I would just add that I think sometimes it's good when athletes have a connection to a particular issue to be able to share their personal experience to help really kind of amplify. No, this is such an issue that I was even affected by this, and I think a lot of times, I think it was Serena Williams who around her birth of her daughter, and she was fighting to just be heard in the hospital, and her pushing that, and you've had Black women saying for years, we're not listened to, our bodies are not respected, how we say we feel about what we're experiencing is always ignored, and it took this athlete saying, no, I experienced the same thing. They ignored me and I almost died because of it. So now I'm amplifying that we need to be thinking about this and need to give this more attention. So I think definitely, if they have that personal connection, utilizing that as leverage to say, no, this has impacted me too. I'm not, that much more different from you all. And, I want this to be seen and addressed.
Absolutely. If I could just add, T. Marie, with you being from doing the work that you're doing in Alabama, I think one of the highest impact events we've recently had was with the Detroit Lions. They had a community conversation, a virtual conversation, and Trey Flowers, who's on their team, is from Alabama. And having Trey frame why voting was important to him, you know what I mean? It moved me. And I do this I'm doing this all day. People talking about other issues, and sometimes I can tune out. But having him frame the importance of voting in his family because they're from Alabama, what his mom and his aunts, he could run down the things they did and connections to the Freedom Riders. And, to your point, it made it so real. And again, he has this platform, and to connect people authentically in that way, where we were able to see that piece has had over 90,000 views as far as since it's been live streamed, since we had the event. And so I just couldn't agree more. That personal, this is what moves me, and this is who I am, and this is why this issue moves me, has had a great impact.
That's those personal stories, that's testimony, right? We do it in court, you do it, some people do it in church, you do it just in everyday interaction, but it's testimony, and it makes it real, more so than just doing whatever's popular at the time. I mean, t-shirts are great, but the story behind it, right? That someone's actual lived experience, that's what people really connect to, not just something that comes across as a slogan, even though it is very genuine. So I really ditto what T. Marie and Diane have said. I just want to add, just in terms of the piece about preparation, I like what you said, Diane, about athletes being used to that. I'll call it a discipline, right, of preparation, or a habit of preparation. And we need it because the last thing we need in the causes that we all work on is a fickle partner who, athletes have a lot of voices around them, even at the collegiate level, right? You have your coaches, you have, on the pros, you have your agents, and then your manager, and then, family and other influencing nonprofits like ours, right? And so you have a lot of voices out there. So kind of cutting through that noise. But once they can cut through that, cut through not so much the noise, but cut through all the differences of opinion and have a clarity of understanding and perspective, it's much easier for them to be that strong partner, because these are generational battles on these issues. These are not just issues that come and go. It's not just one election. It's not just one person who's behind bars, whom you love and care about or know about, or one person who was killed, right? It's a systemic generational piece. And so this is a long struggle, and we need folks to be clear about the struggle that they're stepping into and what that means for them in their careers.
Thank you. So we've spent some time talking about this education and framing piece, and particularly the focus has been on the professional athlete space. I was wondering what advice you all have for athletes in the collegiate space who are contemplating engaging in activism, and if there are any particular pitfalls that you see that they're particularly vulnerable to. Could you speak to that? And I'll take whoever wants to go first.
I can start or I can wait.
Go ahead, Diane. We both work with the Big Ten Conference, so maybe we can reference them, but you go ahead.
Well, you know what, I'm gonna leave that Big Ten overview to you. But one of the things I think we have done and we do a lot of work in the collegiate space. I'm gonna say I personally am often guided by our collegiate athletes, right? They're a different generation. They think differently. They push in ways that I don't necessarily see on the other levels of sport. So I really enjoy it. We actually launched the Rise Digital Learning Series after COVID hit in April. And our second course, we had our interns, who are all college students, create the different components of our kind of racism subtopic. And they came up with a video in regard to anti-racism. Unlike, I'm not saying we couldn't have come up with it, but I am saying that it is amazing. I invite anyone to go and to see it. So I think there is just such room in this space for that population. They're not tomorrow's leaders, they're today's leaders. And I really think they help us to think about these topics differently. As far as pitfalls, they are many, right? We are seeing at every level confusion. And listen, NCAA is on my board. I'm not trying to say anything negative about them, but I think everyone can say we are at this really interesting time with confusion about the definition and the parameters of a student athlete. So the pitfalls are many because they're in the middle of this quagmire, right? And they are individuals having feelings. The upside, and hopefully Damon will share one example, is I am starting to see more of the institutions and the organizations protect and promote this right to have feelings, to have thoughts, to be thoughtful people, and to share it in constructive ways. But the pitfalls for the student athlete are many, and it's mostly because of the structure that they have to function within.
Well, and following up on Diane, these student athletes are inspiring. In the sessions I've been privy to within the Big Ten Conference and elsewhere, without mentioning individual schools, just the degree of candor that you see, the kind of unvarnished just rawness of emotion, and just the clarity that student athletes are bringing is really important. And you love to see the examples, as Diane mentioned, when they have that air cover, so to speak, from their coaches and administrators. We've also seen in the media examples where that isn't the case. I mean, I've received text messages asking, hey, can you help find representation for this student athlete who was kicked off the team after they decided to engage in some activity that you would otherwise think is protected activity at a state university, right? So there's a number of pitfalls. There's also, other pieces. It's hard to have a conversation like this and not think about Colin Kaepernick, right? Who didn't start all movement, as some people think, but he's a critical piece. And whatever you think of him, his talent, his story, or what happened, is very clear that there are impacts on an individual in your career trajectory. So if you're a student athlete and you come from a background where oppression manifested itself by your family being poor or being among the working poor, you're thinking about the future you're trying to provide. Tre'Davious White, who's with the Buffalo Bills, signed a big contract recently. He played at my alma mater, LSU, and he was brought to near tears just talking about what it meant to be able to now have the big contract, not the initial rookie contract, but the big contract to provide for his family. He said, I can retire my parents. And so I think that a lot of student athletes, you're thinking about, if I make a misstep, whether it be getting in some type of trouble or whether it be getting crossways with my coach or administrators, what does that mean for my career? And so my message to them isn't be careful what you say because there may be ramifications. It's the more you have a clarity of conviction and that you're not making random statements and comments, but that you have clarity and the extent to which you have, I'd say, safety in numbers, right? To where you actually are mobilizing alongside. And also the extent to which you do work that isn't simply adverse to everyone, like adverse to your coaches, but you bring them along with you. We saw at Clemson University, Coach Dabo Swinney was criticized, I believe, in the press for certain comments he made about Black Lives Matter protesters. Next thing you know, weeks later, he's walking side by side in the march on campus or near campus with his players. So it's not just about being adverse, it's actually about widening the circle of human concern. I think that student athletes can play a large role in that. It is very tricky, and who knows how they find the time to do it, but they figure it out, and they're doing great work.
T. Marie, any particular reaction?
I would probably not use the term pitfall, but more risk. And I would inform student athletes that there are risks to standing up for what you believe in. Whether you're standing up as an athlete or whether you're just, Joe, whoever that played, college ball. There are going to be risk in vocalizing your concerns and the change that you want to see in your community. As someone who speaks to a lot of students in general, I always advise students, get to know your activist community. Find out who are those on the ground folks who are out there doing the work, who are doing the marching, who are doing the policy suggestions, who are working closely with your city government. And when you see things that you don't necessarily agree with, bring them in and say, hey, I'm noticing this has happened. How can I address it? And let them advise. I also like what Damon said about, their strength in numbers. If I knew something happened on one of the campuses here in Birmingham and one of the students reached out to me, I don't want you on Front Street because I want you to be able to do what you need to do to secure your future. But can you help get some students here? And I'll be the vocal person. I'll be the one that put myself out there because that's the position I put myself in every day. And so sometimes it's helping them see how to get creative and innovative and being a part of the change that doesn't actually put them on display.
Great, thank you. Yes, there certainly is a cost-benefit analysis that needs to occur, whether you're a professional or collegiate athlete. There's definitely a cost-benefit analysis that needs to occur when they're contemplating engaging in activism or raising their voice. I want to shift a little bit and ask a couple of questions that are individual specific. And T. Marie, don't move because you're on the hot seat first. I want to read your words back to you and then ask you a question about it. And I hope I can read my handwriting. I really wanted to focus my work on those who have the most power in our society to get them to look at themselves, do the internal work they need to do so we can change society, change how communities look, change laws, change how organizations are run. So that having been said, as your perspective and your approach to your work, what are the top 3 to 5 things you'd convey to owners and executives or managers of athletic programs at the collegiate or professional level in this time frame with regard to these issues that have arisen in the last 3 to 4 months?
Absolutely. First thing I would say is have a conversation with your players about the injustices that are taking place in society, but also locally. What's happened locally, around the campus or the team. What's happening within the vicinity of your stadium, what's happening within the vicinity of your gymnasium, et cetera. Sometimes there are big national issues that we're looking at that needs to be dealt with. And then sometimes there's things right in your back door that is like, okay, yeah, we're mad about this on a national level, but did you know that the folks over here don't have clean water? Is that something that we can address? Next, I would say create an equity committee that is a combination of leadership, but also players, and establish a pipeline for staff and players that may not be on the committee, that they can surface other concerns and issues that they see happening around them that they want addressed. I would say identify a way for staff and players to give locally, and that may be financially, but that also could be time-wise. It can mean a lot to a community for folks just to show up and say, we're going to help you clean up your community, or you know what, we're here to help do this give back, or we're just going to come and hang out with y'all and play on the court with y'all today just because. And I say sometimes even going as far as, adopt a family that has been impacted by police brutality. These communities where these injustices are taking place, from Ahmaud Arbery's family to Breonna Taylor, John Crawford, that's a name people don't talk about a lot, who was killed in Walmart doing what we all do, shop, and so what is it like to say, what, this happened in our community. Let's see how we can support this family as they're working towards seeking justice. And then lastly, bring some of these on the ground folks in to talk to your team and your leadership so that you have a clear understanding and a framework of what the fight is looking like on the ground and what role they can play.
Thank you for that, T. Marie. Now, Damon, would you speak to the collaboration? I know that the Lawyers Committee is extremely busy these days, so there are a lot of collaborations going on. And I know that today is National Voter Registration Day. And that's a big focus of the organization. Would you speak to specifically to the Lawyers Committee's work around or with LeBron's More Than a Vote campaign and any other voter registration efforts that are going on that are being driven by athletes?
Sure, and forgive me if you hear in the background afternoon meltdown for one of my 3 kids.
Not a problem.
It's all a thing today. Well, look, we're so proud. Thank you for queuing that up to partner with LeBron's More Than a Vote. He was pictured, a photograph wearing a T-shirt or a sweatshirt rather that said "Change has not happened." Sitting on the sidelines, and I love that because it's one of the things that Diane, that I've said during the sessions with Rise and with Big Ten, that you can't affect change on the sidelines. I mean, that's something in the sports world but also the other piece of that is that you may not be on the sidelines, you may be an activist, but your activism isn't complete. It's not, you don't perfect that circle unless you actually register and vote. And we understand voting is not a panacea for everything, but it's really part of your 360 activism. If you will bring your whole self to the party, you will talk about it with friends, you will speak on it in terms of your testimony, what have you, but also, and you'll be out there, perhaps even in the streets protesting, but will you actually vote? And so I think that's a huge piece. And so what we're doing with LeBron James' organization, More Than a Vote, is really spreading the word to mainstream the notion of how we spread democracy, frankly, by making sure that voting is not just a right, but it's something that is mainstreamed as a habit, a practice, a culture. We have 4 million people who will turn 18 between the last election and this November 3rd. And so they're all eligible to vote. And so we know that if people start voting early, as young people, you will become what you call chronic voters, right? You will make that a habit. And the truth is, look, we know that people died and were beaten for democracy. They put that on the line. And sometimes that resonates with a younger generation, and sometimes it doesn't, quite frankly. but what resonates is when they can see themselves in the opportunity, not just who gets elected, but see themselves in the habit of voting. And so that's exactly what we're doing with LeBron James. We're so grateful that part of his effort is to sell a lot of apparel and merchandise, which is pretty swanky stuff, in nice colors, black and gold colors. And the proceeds are going to the Lawyers Committee. We're pumping that money right back in to the effort, frankly, almost like a cycle, just to keep that going. He's also working with other organizations like NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where I used to work for a number of years, to help recruit poll workers. And that's a huge piece. And if you've ever been at the polls, and if you lived in a place for a long time, the poll workers. They're quite often people who live in your community. Sometimes they're people who are older and retired, right? And they need support too. They get attacked as well. Their health is at risk from simply doing those temporary jobs right now. And so what he's doing is a huge effort. It's a huge effort. No, I said earlier, we need people on the hard issues, and you would think voting is easy, but actually the easiest thing to do right now for folks, you would think, is actually not to vote, just to sit on the sideline. And so for someone like LeBron and his group to say, no, we're not going to let that happen on our watch, is really important. It's simple, but it's very important.
Thank you.
Michelle, can I quickly add? I just wanted to add in there for Damien, piggybacking off what he was saying. A lot of times when the big election, that's when we really push voting, but these student athletes and just students in general need to understand the importance of voting locally. And that's even where you are going to school. I've met a lot of students who are registered to vote back home, but not registered to vote in the community that they live in. So making sure that they understand, who this judge on the ballot, that's important. This police chief, all these other things that actually impact your day-to-day, whether your streets get paved, how policing is taking place in your community, knowing who the mayor is. Those are elections that are very important, that students need to make sure that they are also participating in those also.
Thank you for adding that, T. Marie. You couldn't be more right on that. And so, Diane, RISE has been at the intersection of sports and social justice for several years now. And would you like to speak to how the landscape has changed or shifted since you joined the organization, I believe, 2 years ago?
Yeah, it's 2 years ago last month. Woo,
okay,
it's like dog years. Thank you.
Years.
Thank you. No, it's been great. It's interesting. I love this question. It really made me think. And here's the two things that I think have changed the most in the past 2 years. I think because of a number of things, whether it's Donald Trump's administration, COVID-19, climate change, I'm not sure what is the catalyst what's the biggest catalyst for the changes, but I think we are seeing more people actually paying attention to these issues of racial equity and social justice and trying to figure out a path forward. And at the same time, we are seeing more division, more confusion about what that path forward could look like. So it's very, those two factors are, clearly it makes our work vital. I think it has pushed us at RISE to be clear about our value add, right? And that we always need to be trying to create this vision of the path forward. What are the topics we need to discuss in various settings with diverse people? What are the skills we need to be building in various settings with diverse people together? How are we adding value to the path forward? Because there are more people interested in the path forward, and there is more confusion about what that path looks like than I think ever before. So I think those are the two biggest changes in the past 2 years, and it's kind of driven what RISE is and what RISE is doing.
Thank you for that response. I checked the chat. I haven't seen any questions dropped in, but certainly if you all have questions, drop them in the chat and we'll start processing them. I'm going to pose another question and see where we are with regard to any questions that have been posted in the chat after that. So Howard Bryant, talks about athletes who have sacrificed in the name of pursuing social justice as being part of this pantheon called the heritage. And some of the athletes that you would place in the heritage would include Paul Robeson, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, John Carlos, and Tommy Smith. Are there any other Black athletes that you can think of that come to mind as being a part of the heritage? And so athletes who, to be clear, athletes who engaged in activism and it came at a major or significant price for them. Who are the unsung members of the heritage in your view? Are there any? And I'm catching you all completely flat-footed.
Yeah, I would shout out because I follow some of the writing of Doug Glanville, who's a former Major League Baseball player and ESPN and other platforms. But he and others helped me through their writing to Curt Flood, who essentially brought free agency to baseball. Black baseball player, never gets mentioned. Not in the Hall of Fame, unless something's changed since the last time I checked. And is essentially forgotten. But the many, I mean, if not everyone plays sports to get wealthy and rich, although there are paydays. But people don't realize sometimes baseball, it's a heck of a payday, right? In terms of the professional ranks, based for, merited for the skill. But the paydays people get in the day, people across all races, heritage, nationalities, in fact, because it's an international game, have Curt Flood to thank for the liberty and freedom to move and choose what team to which you want to play, instead of being quote unquote bought and sold. And he paid a dear price for it and has never gotten even the recognition.
I think that's, so Curt Flood, I think, is an amazing example. I actually think, to put in a little bit for the women, the female athlete, I think right now I am watching the career of Gwen Berry, who is a track and field athlete. And right now is, we'll see if it becomes even more well-known, but not USATF, but I'm forgetting I want to say it is the, I'm going to get the right governing body, because there's so many of them when you're talking about track and Olympic athletes. But the, I'm sorry, hold on. But Gwen was sanctioned for making a political statement, right? Basically standing up. I think she raised her fist. And then the governing body came out and talked about how they support that behavior. And really, she had to go to social media to be like, really? Because I was sanctioned. And it, I think there was some thought that they had worked their way through it, but I see that she recently had a piece in the Washington Post about this. So I think that we should keep our eye on Gwen Berry, because I think this will be another marker that is requiring organizations to be what they say they are. And if you say you are for inclusive policies, if you say that you have policies that support people's right to take a stance, then it's requiring those institutions to live by them. And I think just like Curt Flood, the policy impact that he had will impact generations. I think what she's doing could impact generations to come.
Right, that's a wonderful example. T. Marie, do you have?
I'll say sometimes we don't get an opportunity to choose when human and social justice chooses us. And so I think about Arthur Ashe. He was very inspirational to me and growing up, and not for his athleticism, but more so for the fact that, he contracted a disease trying to save his life and watched people just turn on him just because there was a lack of understanding of what this disease was and how he was impacted, not only financially, but just socially, of him being kind of people trying to push him away and him saying, no, I'm going to stand up. This is impacting me. I'm living with this disease. And so I'm going to be that voice for those who are not brave enough to stand up and who may not even have the wherewithal to do it. And so I don't think he gets enough recognition or love for how he stood up in the midst of that and fighting, even up into his passing, and seeing his wife, kind of take the torch from there and continuously try to fight for not only his legacy, but, that money is raised for this, that people are aware and educated of what this disease is and how it impacts us. So for me, it would be Arthur Ashe.
Great, thank you. You all provided 3 tremendous examples, and I thank you for them. We have a number of questions that have hit the chat, so I'm going to try to get through as many of them as we can in the time that's left. Something we haven't touched on. What advice do you, we've talked about professional athletes, we've talked about collegiate athletes. What advice do you have from the academic side of the house, or the collegiate academic side of the house? What's the best way for athletic departments to support student athletes activism? And is there any way to help through research?
Well, we've seen the best way to me, and Damon touched on one example with Dabo, but I have seen one of the best ways is for the athletic departments to not only empower their athletes, but to lead themselves. And while that might seem like that's just not going to happen, we are now seeing it happen so much more that I believe in it. So last week or 2 weeks ago, I was on a call with USC's football program, and Ronnie Lott came back and took part in the conversation. And that comes from students being interested, but it also came from Coach Clyde personally saying, this is a priority. It was literally a part of one of their team meetings, because at the top of the meeting, he goes over where everybody's supposed to go for COVID testing, where everybody's supposed to be the next day. But this is an important issue, guys. So we're going to talk about this issue together. And so I say that to say that one of the ways I think colleges can be supportive is to figure out the adults who are, or older adults, because the students are adults as well, who are actually in decision-making positions, taking on some of the onus and making space for the students that want to be empowered in this way. And I do also think there's tons of space in this is an untapped area as far as research. I think that we haven't even scratched which questions we should be asking and researching, which outcomes should we be looking at. And so I think this area is ripe for research.
Any other reaction to that question? No. Can you speak to what Maya Moore recently accomplished, and if that might inspire more athletes? And for those who don't know what Maya Moore, who's rock star, WNBA player, effectively took 2 seasons off away from playing to help advocate for an individual that she felt had been wrongly convicted. And that conviction was just recently overturned within the last couple of months. And within the last week or so, she has married the man that she helped or she advocated for his release. So that's who Maya Moore is. And so do you all see other athletes taking a similar approach?
You know, I have so much admiration for what she did, especially because she was at the top of her game as a professional athlete. A game, which, for a lot of different sorry reasons is not as well compensated, as male counterparts, but still a sacrifice nonetheless. And who knows what the impact may have been on endorsements, not because what she was doing was somehow provocative, but because if you're not in the limelight on the court, sometimes the endorsements don't manifest in the same way. I can't think off the top of my head of others who've done exactly the same in a purely volitional way, like stepped away fully from the game for those reasons specifically. And I think that I think it's a challenge, right? Because there's certain economic imperatives, and so for a lot of athletes, especially athletes of color, the dollars you earn aren't just for you, right? Sometimes you're supporting, family, extended family, communities, the foundations and charities that you helped establish, people counting on you. So I'm not sure if it leads to more of exactly the same, but I think it hopefully it at the very least helps to help team ownership and management understand that you don't take the talent for granted, that the talent isn't just, physical, that there's other forms of talent as well from the athletes. And so they can choose to simply not play and step away. So I don't know of other specific examples, but it certainly is inspirational. And I do hope that if she wants to return to playing, that she has that option from her team, from the league, and from the sport overall.
I think we have time maybe to get one final question in. Do student athletes specifically, face an unfair burden in terms of education and solutions? Some of the issues are tremendous. Despite my own study, it's a challenge to succinctly provide a simple plan to fix racial injustice, for instance. How much of that should we put on or expect from student athletes in particular to bear?
That's too much for anybody.
I thought you had it.
Exactly.
We're dealing with centuries worth of layered upon issues. We're a country that was built on the genocide of Indigenous and First Nations people. We are a country that was built on chattel slavery. We are a country that was built on legalized oppression and legalized segregation. Sundown towns, Jim Crow laws. We're not that far removed from those things. There's a lot of work to do. There's no simple, easy fix to it. It's not. It's layered. It's going to take all of us. We're all coming at it from different angles. I love that young people want to be engaged in this because they have these innovative ideas. They have all these, hey, why aren't we doing it this way? Let's utilize this method. Hey, I'm Snapchatting this, which is something that we all may not necessarily do. But you know what? If you got 1 million followers and they watching you because they watch you play on Saturday or Sunday, then by all means, Snapchat it. But I think making sure people have information is what's key. Accurate information, that they're following the right people, that they are, surfacing solutions so that we can work. I'm a fan of an activist community, failing fast. If that didn't work, okay, what's next? Let's figure out something else and let's attack it from this way. So, I wish it was a simple plan. It would make all our jobs a lot easier and we wouldn't have to continue to have these conversations. But, like Maya, I hope there are issues in society that won't let student athletes alone, that they decide, I'm willing to sacrifice this because I believe in it so strong. And me sacrificing maybe my career or my time on the field or the court is more important and getting maybe a new law changed.
Yeah, I would add that I agree. I don't think it's completely on them, but I will say that part of the reason why we are in this situation, in addition to all the reasons that I think T. Marie expressed so eloquently, is that we also have had enough apathy, and we've had enough people be able to benefit in the oppressive system that the oppression continues. And that is where we definitely say to collegiate athletes that work with RISE, we think folks need to be thinking really introspectively about what is your role. You can't say you have no role, right? Like, this system is so ingrained that if everybody doesn't say, what is my role? What do I need to do? It is just going to take us even more centuries to get out of this situation. And so I don't think anybody bears sole responsibility, but everybody's got to be figuring out, what do I reject? What will I just simply not accept? What do I need to make sure I'm educated about? What do I need to look in the face and say, call a spade and not allow? We all have to do that for us to change this system. This system is intricate, and it's going to take all of that to overturn it.
So powerful from T. Marie and Diane. I wish we could end with that. Um, so I would echo what they said and just add that, you could destroy something on your own, but it's very difficult to build on your own, something that lasts. Pyramids weren't built by one person. And so, I think that being, as Tim Marie alluded to earlier, being in community, in the activist community, connected to fellow student athletes, peers across institutions, especially, which is another sign of strength. And also, to the extent permissible under NCAA regulations, professional athletes and professional ranks as well. I think is very important because what we're all doing is, all of us, we're doing our momentary duty. Some people may get more notoriety than others, have different platforms, bully pulpits, but none of us is going to, steer this ship on our own. So being connected and being engaged and understanding where you sit in, in the ecosystem is really important.
Right. Thank you all so much for your time. T. Marie, Damon, Diane, on behalf of myself and the University of Florida College of Health and Human Performance and Dr. Segas, thank you many times over for your time and more importantly, your thoughts and your insights. We hope you all you participants, we thank you for being here. We hope we are sure you found some value in it. Please be sure to check out the websites and check out the resources that are available, particularly on Rise. Is it risetowin.org?
Yes, thank you. risetowin.org and all social media handles. If you go Rise to Win, we have most of it in the social media space as well.
Great. And Damon, is it Lawyers Committee? I don't want to get your handle wrong. So why
You got it, lawyerscommittee.org, but for the next 40 some odd days, you can go straight to 866-OUR-VOTE.org or call the election protection hotline 866-OUR-VOTE.
Great. And T. Marie?
Y'all can just follow me on Instagram. TM King 79. I'm doing some interesting things. Check me out.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. The next session, Miami Heat, sometime during the week of October 5th through the 9th. So be on the lookout for notifications around that. And in the meantime, you all stay safe and take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.